In today's video, we're going to be building something that many of you have requested for quite a while, and that is a real-time group chat app. We're going to be using a no-code tool, and we're going to be using no-code with a Supabase backend for this. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I demonstrate on this channel will be available to view and or clone from my Patreon page. And you can learn more about our amazing Patreon community via the link in the description below the video. Now, what's nice about this project is that many of the apps out there today have some kind of chat functionality. So we're not just talking about specifically a chat app like WhatsApp or Telegram. All kinds of apps out there, even if they perform something completely different from merely chatting, do require some kind of a chat functionality so that the users can exchange some sort of information with each other. And so you can view this whole project as a feature for your future or existing app, because you can simply leverage what I'm about to teach you in your specific apps and provide a lot more value to your users. Now, before we get started, it's very, very important to build an overall architecture of the app. So we're going to be building a real-time group chat app. We are going to be using NoCode and Supabase as our backend. The NoCode tool that we're going to be using is going to be FlutterFlow, which is my favorite NoCode tool. Now, here's the basic flow of the app. So the user is going to load up the app and they're going to see a list of chats. Okay. Now they can click on some button and they're going to get a display, a list of users, and they can select the user and start a new chat with this user. Now, once they do that, they're going to have a new chat being displayed here. And if they click on this new chat, they're going to go to another screen where they're going to see messages between themselves and other people. Now, this could be one other person or this could be multiple other people, because remember, we are building a group chat app. Now, let's say while you're chatting with someone, you or the other person wants to invite another person into the chat. Well, that's also very, very simple. You can simply click on a button and you're going to be shown a list of users that you can add to an existing chat. And once you do that, the other person whom you've added will be able to see that they're part of this new chat. Now, the next thing that I want to discuss is the database schema. Now, this is very, very important because you want to get this right, because the whole app is going to be built off this. Okay, very, very important to get it right. Now, remember, we are using Supabase for this. And so keeping that in mind, that's how we are going to be building our database schema. Let's start off with this user info table. So Supabase has a built-in users table, and that table has a bunch of fields. It has a user ID. It has a bunch of information. But if you're interested in storing additional information about the user, then it's not really recommended to go out and try to modify the original table. What you want to do is you want to create a new table and then link this table here to the original users table. And so I have this table called user info. And this table is going to contain additional information about each of the users. So things like maybe nickname or some of the other information that we deem valuable in this app. Next, I want to talk about these three tables here that really make up the app right here. Okay. The first table we have is a chats table, and this table is going to represent the individual chats. Because each chat can have multiple users, we need to create another table, and this is going to be the chat users table. And so the idea here, these are just the chats. Chat users is going to link each of these chats to multiple users, regardless whether it's just another person or multiple other people that I may be chatting with. Last but not least, we have the chat messages table, and this table is going to contain the individual messages. And so what you should be noticing here is that we are forming relationships. We have a one-to-many relationship from chats to chat users, and we have a one-to-many relationship from chats to chat messages. And that is because you can have multiple users as part of the chat, and you're all obviously going to have multiple messages as part of that chat as well. And Supabase is a relational database, is based on PostgreSQL. And so as a result, you always need to be thinking about relationships. Now, this right here forms the core of our database system. But when you are going to be displaying different screens as part of your UI, you may need to pull out the data in certain ways. And the way you do it in Supabase is you need to create individual views so that you're pulling in the data from multiple of these tables and formatting it in the way that you can display it in your views. And for that, you need to set up your views in Supabase. And that is why I have this one view called the chats view. And this view is going to be for this list of chats here. Now, of course, as we start building the app, we might be adding more views here. But right now, I see a definite need for this chats view right here. All right, so now that we looked at the app's architecture and we also looked at the app's data schema, let's go ahead and log into Supabase and start creating our tables in there. All right, so here I am logged into Supabase, and I'm going to be using one of my existing projects for the app that we are building. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to go to my table view here, and I'm going to start to create various tables. The first table that I want to create is this user info, which is going to contain additional user information that we might need to store on each user record. So we're going to come back here, create a new table, and I'm going to call this users info. And I'm going to be prefixing all the tables and all the views that I'm going to be creating for this app with an A underscore. Okay, so this is our first table right here. Let's go ahead and create the field. Now, the first field that you want to create is a link to the original user that's stored in Supabase. This is a built-in table called auth users. And before you can do that, you want to select the type. The type is going to be UUID, and I'm going to call this a user ID. And we're going to click here. And what you want to do is you want to choose auth, and then you want to select users here. This is a built-in table provided by Supabase that contains a list of users. Okay, so we're going to click save, and now we have a link to the original users table. Next, you want to create the actual fields where you're going to be storing additional information for the user. Now, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm only going to store a nickname for now. So let's say instead of displaying the user's email or something else in the chat, I'm just going to have a user's nickname. Okay, so we're going to set this as text right here. And for now, this should suffice. Later on, we can add another column and store some other piece of data on a user record. So we're going to click save here. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and create this brand new table for us. All right, so this table has been created. The next table that I want to create is this chats table. So we're going to come back here. We're going to click on new table. I'm going to call this chats. Now, this table is going to be fairly simple because if you recall, it's going to be these tables that are going to be linked to this table. This table by itself is not going to be linked to anything. And really, the only thing that I want to store on this table here is the last message. Okay, so I want to display that last message on that main chat list view. So I'm going to say last message right here, and I'm going to say this is going to be text. Okay, we're going to click on save. All right, and we have this new table created. Next, I want to create this table right here, which is going to be responsible for storing the actual users that belong to a particular chat. So we're going to come back here, new table, chat users, and this particular table needs a couple of columns. Now, this particular table is going to be storing the chat and the user that's linked to that chat. So the first field we need is the chat ID, and we're going to give it a type int8. We're going to link it to the table that we've just created, which is this a chats. And the next column we need is a user ID. Okay, now this user ID is not going to be linked to the original auth user table that's provided by Supabase. This is going to be linked to that intermediate table that we've just created. So you want to say this is going to be int8 right here, and you're going to link it to that a users info table. All right, so now we have two columns here. And the idea is if we add a user to the chat, we are going to create another record with that specific chat ID and the user ID. And that way we can add multiple users, and these are just going to be multiple records there. Okay, we're going to click save here. Finally, we're going to create this chat messages table. So we're going to come here, new table, a chat messages. Now for the columns here, what we need to store is we need to store the chat, we need to store the user, and we need to store the actual message that that particular user had sent. So we're going to add a column, chat ID. This is going to be int 8. We are going to link it to a chats, this one right here. Save. Next is the user ID, int 8. We're going to link it to a user info right here. And last but not least, the actual message that the user typed. And this is going to be just text. All right. So now we have the following tables created. We have the a user info, which is going to contain additional user information. Next, we have the a chats, which is the base chat table. And this is going to be the table that's going to be linked to other tables via this ID. Next, we have the a chat users, which is going to store the individual users for specific chats. And last but not least, we have the a chat messages, which is going to store the individual messages that the user is sending to a specific chat. Now, when I create these tables, the next thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to populate these tables with sample data. And once I have the data, I can start building the actual app, and I can start to test the app to see if with the given data, the app is displaying it the way I want it to display. This is kind of how I build apps, and it allows me to build my data schema and then to start to build the actual UI and quickly reconcile any of the issues that might arise with the data not properly being synced up or displayed in the UI. So let's go ahead and add a record to this a user info. I'm going to create a row. These are going to be filled in automatically. Now, when I click on select record here, I have a list of users, and these are users that I created manually. And so if you're starting with a fresh project, you can simply create these users manually. And so I'm going to select James here as the user that we're going to be adding additional info. And let's say the nickname, I'm just going to put NoCode, 00, something like this, hit save. And now we have a record in this table that's linked to the actual user in the built-in Supabase table. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the rest of these tables. So in this chats table, I'm going to insert a row. And the last message, let's say it's hey, which is going to be updated by the system automatically. Chat users, let's go ahead and add a chat user record, insert a row. Let's select the chat. We've just created it. And let's select the user. This is this NoCode. And so now this chat has one user. Now you want to make sure that it has at least two users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to user info, and I'm going to insert another record here for another user. So I'm going to select another user. Let's say Rob, and the nickname is Rob Awesome. Okay, now I'm going to go back to chat users and add another user for that chat. Chat ID is this chat right here, and the user ID is Rob Awesome. And let's go into chat messages and add a record here. So the chat ID is going to be this chat right here. The user ID is going to be NoCode. And let's say I sent a message called hey, and let's say Rob replied. So I'm going to add another row right here. Chat ID is still the same chat. User ID is Rob Awesome, and he replied, doing good, and you? And so at this point, we have the initial data for a chat. So we have all of these tables with some sample records, and we can potentially build our app now, and we can start to actually display that first chat. The user can click on it and see some of the messages, and that's exactly what I want to do, because if this works here, then everything is going to work, because this is kind of how I wanted to design the app. And this is why it's important to make sure that, the way that you are designing it, the architecture, the stuff that we talked about in the beginning of the video, means that you can translate all of this into a workable app. And you want to make sure you test this theory as soon as possible. And so now let's jump into FlutterFlow and start building our initial screens and see if the data is going to be showing up in the right places. So here I am in FlutterFlow. I'm going to create a brand new chat. We're going to call this RT group chat for real-time group chat. Create blank here, not using Supabase this time. And here we have a blank app waiting for us to start coding. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to connect your app to Supabase. You can click on settings and integrations here, click down to Supabase, and you want to enable Supabase and add the fields here. And for that, you can simply go to your project here, project settings, API, and you want to copy URL, paste it in here, and you also want to copy a non-public, paste it in here, get schema. Once you do that, it's going to pull up all your tables as well as the views. Now I have lots of tables and lots of views, but they're for different projects. You can just ignore them. The only tables and views you should be focusing on are the ones that start with a underscore. So it's these tables here, and then we're also going to be adding views a little bit later. Next, you want to enable authentication because we need to know who's actually logged in so that we can figure out who's actually sending the messages. For that, you can click on authentication, enable authentication. Authentication type is Supabase. Entry page is going to be a login page, which we don't have yet. Logged in page is going to be the home page. So it needs an entry page. And so you can come back to the UI builder, add a page here, new page, and you can click on auth right here, scroll down. This is the page I like to use. You can use anyone that you want. I'm going to call it login, click on create page. So this is our main page right here. And as you can see, we have some errors. And one of the reasons is because we have these third-party auth systems here. So we're going to delete that so that we can just focus on just username and password here. And we're going to delete it off the login page as well. Delete this right here. Just keep it very, very simple in the start. Okay, it looks good. We still have a couple of issues, confirm password and entry page that we can specify. So the confirm password is, if you select this right here, we are missing this confirm password field. And that is because we don't have this field. So this create account, you want to select password, duplicate it, and then you want to click here, call this password 2, and then you can select this error right here and select password 2 here. And now you have this green checkbox. And we still have one error, and that's because we did not specify an entry page, login, and now we should have no errors right here. Okay, looks good. Okay, so this is our login page right here. Now, for the home page, we want to display a list of existing chats, and there's actually a couple of really nice templates that we can use. So if you click on new page and you click on lists, there's some really, really cool templates that we can use. So for instance, this is a good one right here. Select this and call it chats. Create page, and we have a beginning of a page that we can use for the existing chats. Now, because the actual messages screen we are going to be building ourselves, I'm going to rename this to messages, chat messages right here. Next, I want to create a page that's going to display existing users so that when you want to start a new chat, you can select the user off there. And for that, if you click on new page, there's some really good templates that we can use. So I really like this one, user select. Select this right here. I'm just going to say user select. Okay, create this. Now this template right here is going to act like a pop-up. It's not going to act like a full-blown page. And in order to have a pop-up, you need to convert this page here, or at least a part of this page, into a component. And so I'm going to select this user select, select this stack right here, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say convert to component, and I'm going to call this user select comp. Okay, create component. Okay, so now I have this component right here. I'm going to delete this user invites right here. Now, later on, we're going to clean it up further, but right now it gives us something that we can display to the user and have the user pick the actual person that they want to chat with and add them to the chat. And so at this point, I can delete this user select because we have the component here anyway. All right, so at this point, we have all the pages that I foresee needing for this app. I mean, we can still add another page or two later on, but at least now we can actually build a fully functioning chat app with the pages that we already have. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to test out this app. And when I run this app, the first page that I should be seeing is this chats page here. And so let's go ahead and get this page working right now with the right data. So we're going to click here, rename this chats, and maybe delete this for now, delete this, just clean it up a little bit. And we have a list of chats, so we can select one of these chats and then enter a group chat with other people. And so hypothetically, we should be pulling data from the chats table. And so if we go into our chats table here, we can see that the only data that we really have is ID, created at, and the last message. We do not have any data about the users. And what I really want to do is I want to display the actual users in this chat, because just like in any chat app, the chat will be displaying the users that are, in that chat, right? And because this is a group chat app, we're going to be displaying possibly multiple users as well. But we can't pull this data directly from chats because it's not here. And so what do we need to do? Well, we need to create a view that's going to pull multiple pieces of data for multiple tables that are linked to each other. And in order to create our first view, you want to click here to the SQL editor. And here you can enter a SQL statement that can potentially pull multiple pieces of data from multiple tables and then give you all of this data in the exact format that you need. Or you can ask Supabase AI to build that query for you. And so here's a sample prompt that I used in order to create our view for us. So it says here, create a view to show chat ID, list of usernames in the chat, list of user IDs, and the last chat message. And the SQL statement to create this view looks something like this. So we can simply execute it to create our view. And now if we go into our list of tables, we can see that we have a new view created. So this is our A chat summary view that gets us all the information that we need. And in fact, when we load up this view, we can see the data that we are getting back. So we're getting back one record. We have the chat ID, we have the nicknames in the chat, we have the user IDs in the chat, and we have the last message that's going to be set independently. And so this is very, very powerful because now we have the nicknames that we can display in our chat, but we also have the user IDs that we can filter against so that we are showing the chats where the user is a part of, right? You don't want to just show any chat. And so we have user readable information that, we can just display. Well, you're chatting with Rob Awesome, or if Rob Awesome logs in, it's going to say you're chatting with NoCode 00. But we also have the user IDs for filtering. This is very, very helpful to us, and that's the power of Supabase, is that we can create these awesome views just to give us the information that's useful to us. This is what I love about Supabase. So now that we have this view working, let's go back to our app and let's click here. Let's reload the schema here, get schema, refresh the schema, and we should have that view right here at the bottom. This is this chat summary. And if we select it, you can see the schema right here. And this schema is what FlutterFlow is going to interact with. And as you can see, we have a list of string for the nicknames, as well as a list of string for the user IDs that we can easily filter against, okay? So now that we have this view working and displaying the data that we need, we can go back to UI Builder and we can actually feed it into the view so that we can display the data. All right, so I'm going to click on this list view right here, click here, add a backend query, Supabase query, and I'm going to select a chat summary. We should probably add view at the end so that it's going to be easier to differentiate views from tables. And that is something I'm going to do in just a second. Click confirm, confirm. Now, before we can actually test our app, we need to make sure that we have the security policies set up correctly. So if you click on this users info, we see that we have no active RLS policies, and you want to make sure that you have your policies set up. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to click on new policy and I'm going to say full customization, and I'm going to just enable everything. I'm going to say allow all and click here, and here I'm going to say true, review, save policy. Okay, now obviously when you finish building your app, it goes into production, you want to fine tune those policies, but right now we are testing. It is absolutely fine to make sure that everything works. before we launch the app. Okay, so we have this users info right here with a policy. Let's go back and let's click on chats. Let's go ahead and add a policy for chats as well. Click on all, true, and let's go ahead and do that for the rest of the tables and this last table right here. All right, so now all the tables have one active RLS policy. Okay, you don't need to do it for the views because the views are going to be pulling the data from the tables. All right, so now that is done, we can test out our app and see if it's getting the right data. All right, so here's our app. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and now I'm seeing the chats screen. And as you can see, I'm also seeing one record from the chat, which is the only record that we have. So if we go back to our app, we can see that. And so if we go back to the database, you will see that in our chats view, which is this a chat summary, we only have one record. Now, what's cool about this is that I can actually filter these records to make sure that it's only displaying the chats where I am the member. This database schema makes it really easy to do that. And so if I click on the list view, edit backend query here, I can add a filter. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say user IDs. That's why we have these user IDs. We can say list contains, and we're going to say authenticated user ID here, confirm. Okay. And so now if we reload the app, we should still see that record there because I am a member in that group chat. All right, there you see it. So this is that one chat that's still being displayed even though we are filtering by the authenticated user, as long as the authenticated user is a member in that list of users in that group chat. So as you can see, it's there. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to display the users that are part of this chat, excluding myself. So that way I can see immediately what is this chat about and whether I want to engage in this chat right now. And so if we go back to the app, we can easily do that. And so first I'm going to delete this email. And here I want to display the other users that are in that group chat without displaying myself. And so if you take a look at this view right here, you see we have two nicknames and we have two user IDs. Now the elements in each of these lists correspond to each other. So this JNoCode00 is this user ID here. Rob Awesome is this user ID here. And so what we need to do is we need to take a look at the authenticated user, and then we need to display the other users. And so what we can do is we can put all the other users together and then separate them with a comma. So in this case, let's say I'm logged in and this is my user ID. And so what that means is that this is my nickname. And so what I need to do is take all the other nicknames and join them together and then put a comma between them and then use that string to display it right here in this random name. Okay, and we can achieve all that with a custom function. Okay, so if you come over here, we can simply create a custom function here, create a new function, and this function is going to be called get the other users. Okay, now this function is going to take a lot of parameters. Okay, we need to pass a list of nicknames, we need to pass a list of user IDs, and we also need to pass the authenticated user right now. So there are three arguments that this function needs. Okay, so we have a string, which is a list right here, and this is going to be nicknames. You can do nicknames list. Another argument is this user ID list, and the last argument is the current authenticated user. So the function can compare, who is the authenticated user and just list the other user ID. So this is the auth user right here, and this is going to be a string right here, not a list. Okay. So now we have this function, and this function is going to return that concatenated, that joined string. Now I use ChatGPT to create this function, so I can simply copy the body of this function, come back here and put it right here. Here I want to make sure that the body of the function references the arguments. So we're going to copy this right here, replace it here, and take this user list, replace it here, and then this target word is this auth user. Okay, so now we have this function ready. Next, you want to click save so that the function is saved, and now you have this function here. One thing that you may want to do is test it out real quickly, just to make sure that things work as expected. So you can click here, test function, and here you can give a bunch of nicknames. And so let's say this is John, Joe, and here you can have a bunch of user IDs. So let's say this is user ID 1 and this is user ID 2. And then you're passing in the user ID of the authenticated user. So let's say the authenticated user is user ID 2, which means that this is this user, which means this is Joe. So we need to respond with John. So let's go ahead and run it and let's see if it works. And it gives us John back. Now let's say we have a couple of more users here and user ID 3. And so in this case, we're passing in user ID 2. This is Joe. It should give us back John and Mike. Let's run this and see if it works. And it's giving us John and Mike. And this is perfect because this function is going to display all the other users that we have. All right, so now that we're sure this function works as expected, we can pass in the various arguments. Okay, so we're going to pass in the nicknames list here, which is this nicknames here. We're going to pass in the user list, user IDs, and the auth user, which is this one right here, authenticated user, user ID. All right, click confirm. And now when we run this app, we should get the list of other users, excluding ourselves. Okay, so let's go ahead and check this custom function for any issues. Okay, no issues. And let's go ahead and reload our app. So here's our app, and right now it's displaying Rob Awesome. Okay, and that's the other user. Remember, this specific chat here only has 2 users, right? This is me because that's my authenticated user ID right here. And this is the other user. And so if we were to create another chat, which we can actually do right now, let's say I create another record here. I'm going to insert another row. This is chat ID, the same chat ID 1. And let's say the user is going to be another user. And for that, we need to add the user first to our user info table. Remember, this is that auxiliary table that we created. Let's go ahead and add another user. And let's go ahead and let's add Tom. And nickname is Tom. And let's go ahead and save this. Now let's go back into chat users, insert a row, chat ID 1. And user, this is Tom. All right, so now we have a group chat with 3 users, and when we run the app, we should be seeing Rob Awesome and Tom. Let's go ahead and see what is happening. And as you can see, now it's displaying Rob Awesome, Tom. So this logic works, and this is kind of tricky to do, but as you saw, it's fairly simple to do with Supabase. And the only thing we may want to change is like chat with, Rob Awesome, Tom, which is very, very simple to do. You can simply click here, text combine text, and you can do something like chat with. And here you can put in that function there, put in the arguments again, nicknames, user IDs, and the auth user ID as well. Confirm. Let's go ahead and reload this. It's a slight, cosmetic change. Rob Awesome, Tom. Okay. So now we have the chat list. There's still a couple of things that we need to do. The next one that I want to work on is the actual chat messages screen, where the user can click here and see all the messages from the users in here. And then we also need to do a couple of flows. So for instance, this one where we create a new chat and we can select the user or users. And another flow that we want to do is inside the chat messages, you can also add a user into the chat as well. So now let's go ahead and do the chat messages screen. So we're going to come back here and we have this chat messages here. It's an empty page, but we're going to work on it right now. So the chat messages needs to get a chat ID, right? So that's the first thing we need to do is we need to grab the chat ID, and that's going to be a parameter. And so here you can add a parameter. We're going to add a parameter and we are going to be passing a Supabase row. Okay. This is required. And we are going to be passing the row from the previous page. Okay. So this is going to be that view a chat summary here. And I'm just going to say chat row, click confirm. And now from the chat screen, we can have, let's say they click on a row here, and we can do an action where we are going to be navigating them to that next page, the chat messages, and we're going to pass that row. Okay, so we're going to pass this Supabase row directly. Okay, and once we have that row, we can get the chat ID. We can get all kinds of interesting information there. Once the user is redirected to chat messages, they're getting that row, and this is the row they're getting, right? This is this whole row, and we have the chat ID, so we can always get the chat ID and get the correct data. Plus we have the other users, we have a lot of interesting things. And so let's go ahead and build out this page right here. Now this page here, this is going to be a list view that's going to pull up all the messages from the chat messages screen. And if we go to our chat messages right here, we can see this table. We can see what kind of table that we're working with. Okay, so this is going to be our chat messages. And what kind of data do we need? This is what you need to ask yourself every time you create a view. Well, we need the messages. We need the chat ID because we're going to be filtering by the chat ID, but we also need the actual user nickname. Okay, so we don't need just, you know, the user ID. We need to create a new view that's going to grab the data, pull the exact data that we need here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new view. So this is this a chat messages. We're going to create a new view right here. And I'm going to say create a view that displays chat messages info, chat messages info. So chat ID, user nickname, and message. We can also add chat messages created time, user nickname, and message. Okay, let's go ahead and execute this. Let's see if it's able to get the right data. All right, so it came back with this. Let's go ahead and accept this change. And this is the view. And so what's happening here is it's creating this new view right here, and it's taking this chat messages and it's joining it with this user's info to get the nickname, right? So that way it can display the nickname. And so it's displaying the nickname from that user info table, which is what we need. And everything else is getting it from chat messages, which is exactly what we need. The only thing I want to do is I want to make sure that it's creating the view with the view at the end, right? So we're putting a suffix view that's going to be easier to kind of find it. So we have chat messages, info view, chat ID. Okay, looks good. Let's go ahead and run it. Success. And let's go back and take a look at this view. So if we come back here, and this is our view right here, and it forgot to prepend it with a. We're gonna do that in a second, but this is our view. This is what we're gonna be pulling. It looks good, right? We have chat ID, we have the message created, we have the nickname, and we have the message, the actual message. So the only thing I want to do is I want to change I want to replace this so that it has the a prefix. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this view first, and I'm going to create a new view. All right, success. Let's go back here, and now we see the view. Now we see all our tables and views up on top. So if we click here, you can see that now we are viewing the view. And this is so nice because immediately I see the view, I see the data that I'm going to be dealing with. I don't need to do any querying or anything like that. I see the data. This is so awesome. All right, so we have this chat messages info view. Let's go back to our app, but first let's go ahead and refresh the schema. Supabase get schema, yes, and we should see that new view right here. This is the view, and this is the view right here. All right, let's go ahead and use this view. And the way that we want to structure it is, well, we are going to have a list view that's going to pull up all the rows from that view. Okay, so we're going to create a list view here. And now inside the list view, what we can do is we can display alternate rows, right? So like, for instance, my messages are going to be on the right-hand side, and the other users' messages are going to be on the left-hand side. Okay, but I also need a bottom kind of input in order to send the message. So let's do that first. So we have a column. I'm going to add, let's go ahead and add another container, and let's go ahead and format it. So this list view, I wanted to take the maximum space. I wanted to be greedy, right? So that's why we choose this expansion right here. If you do this, then it takes the only the needed view, but you know, we want to take the maximum view. And then this container right here, let's go fix it up. In fact, we don't need the height, the width, because we're going to have a row, right? We're going to have a row right here. And in fact, what we can do is we can give it a height, let's say a height of 50, something like this. Now inside this row, we want to add an input field for the message, and we also want a button. So something like this, that looks good. Let's go fix up this input field. I don't like this underline. Let's do none. Let's go ahead and create the button. Let's make it send right here. And then you can kind of fix it up. So let's go ahead, this input field, let's do a little bit of padding. Okay, looks kind of cool. That looks pretty cool. Yeah, looks pretty nice. We'll fix it later, but for now it looks good. Maybe 10 is too much. Let's make it 5. Okay, so something like this. So this is going to be our message. Let's make it input message here. And so when the user types in the message, we're simply going to save it into the chat messages table. Next, let's go ahead and create this UI here. And so we have this list view here. And what we're going to do is we're going to display alternate rows. So we're going to have one row here, and that row might have a container, and that container is going to be displaying the actual text. Okay. And then what we can do is we can wrap this widget inside of a stack and then duplicate this row right here. And now we have two rows inside of a stack that are going to be displayed in different positions. So let's go ahead and make this row the other users so that it's easier to refer to. Other users or other row, something like this. Other row, and this is my row. Okay, these are going to be, this row is going to display my text here. So we have other row, and what we want to do is we want to align it. So the other row is going to be left aligned, left justified, and my row is going to be right justified, something like this. Let's go fix up the containers, right? Maybe 50 width, I don't know, have it automatically expand, height 50, something like this. And now inside the container, we can have a text. Right, and this one is also going to have a text, and this text is going to display the actual content depending on if it's my text or not my text. Okay, first let's feed in the content for this list view. Click this list view, click here, do a backend query, Supabase query, and what do we want to do? We want to do a chat messages. No, a chat messages info view. That is what we want, right? A chat messages info view. Okay, that is what we want. Confirm, confirm. Now for each of the rows, we want to set a condition. So if it's an authenticated user, display using this my row. If it's not authenticated user, then display it on the left hand side. And so if we want to create the condition that we're going to be using is going to be user ID, but we only have nickname here. And so what we need to do is we need to rebuild this view to make sure that we also have the user ID. So I'm going to do just that right now. And so here to this view, we can easily add another field. And the field that we want to add is this ID right here that we're going to join on the other table. And here we've created a new view to also display the ID. So if we go back to our tables and views, we can see that we should also have the ID in there. Okay, and so here's the original user ID that we can check if that's my message or someone else's. Now looking at this view, to avoid any further confusion, we need to change this ID to user ID. So we're going to come back here, open SQL editor. And so we're going to drop this view and create another one with another field. And the way you can do that is where it says ID, this is that user ID. I'm just going to put as user ID, and we get success, no rows returned. Go back to our views. And now there should be no confusion. What is the ID and what is the user ID? And here we have the user IDs. Go back to our app and reload the schema. And now we can actually do the condition. So we can come back here, this other row. We're going to say, well, we want to make sure that the user ID is something else, right? So we have this user ID right now. This is other row, right? So it should not be equal to the authenticated user. Okay. This is the authenticated user. Okay. Let's do that. Let's copy this. And this one, this should be equal right here. User ID is equal to this authenticated user. Confirm, confirm. All right. So now hopefully we should see both messages in different places on the screen. Let's go ahead and compile our custom function. All right. So here's the app. And if we click here, we see this hello world and we do not see this other message, even though if we come back here, we have two messages, and the reason we're not seeing them is because we haven't put a variable here so that it pulls the correct data. So we're gonna go back to our UI, and this text, it needs to pull in the message, right? So this needs to get the message, and this needs to get the message. And here there's no text, and that's why it's not being displayed. And now we need to display the message. All right, so now we have the messages. Let's go ahead and reload this. All right, here's the app, and this is the chat. Click here, and now we are seeing the messages. So it says here, hey, how are you? Doing good, and you? And if we go to our Supabase here, we see that we only have two messages. And obviously, if we had another message, then it would also be displayed. And in fact, we can create another message by going into chat messages. And let's say we also have Tom. Tom is the third wheel. We're going to add a row. Chat ID is 1. user ID. This is going to be Tom, and the message is, hey, I'm Tom. Okay. Save. Let's go ahead and reload this. All right. Click here and hey, how are you? Doing good. And you? Hey, I'm Tom. The other thing that we want to add is the user that's actually sending the message. It's going to be a good idea to do that. That's very, very easy to do. So inside these containers, we want to have multiple elements. So you want to add a column inside of these containers. So I'm going to wrap a widget in a column, and that way I can duplicate this. So I want to duplicate it, and I'm going to do the same thing. A wrap widget in a column, duplicate. And so we have this message, we have two messages. And so let's say at the top, this is going to be the user, and at the bottom, the message, or the other way around. So maybe the message first and then the user. Okay. So message. We're going to come back here. This is going to be nickname. And here we also want a nickname on the bottom. And so here we're going to have a nickname. And here we also want the nickname. Okay, so we know who is sending the message. And let's give it a little bit of padding. In fact, this column can be nicely padded. So something like with 5, give it 10. Let's see. Okay, so something maybe 10 is too much. 5 is better. We can fix that later. 5. Okay, all right, then let's give it some padding with the text, some bottom padding, 5, and this text 5. And let's make sure the container doesn't need a height so that it automatically expands. Containers automatically expand based on the stuff that's inside, okay? Now the row, I can give it a little bit of padding for each row. So something like this. Okay, so that's starting to look good. Let's go ahead and reload this and see how it looks. All right, chats, click here. There it says, hey, how are you? NoCode, doing good and you. So we can make maybe the user smaller, or maybe the text larger, maybe put some italics here, right? It's up to you how far you want to take it. The only thing that I want to do as well is I want to give this rounded corners. So I'm going to go to this container and we can give it rounded corners for the container. Let's do that. And we can come in here, this border radius. We can do something like this. Let's go ahead and give this some padding for the row so that we can see the container. Let's give it 10. Okay, looks good. And same thing for this row. Okay. Let's go ahead and reload this and see how it looks. Of course, if you are a member of our Patreon, you'll be able to easily view and or clone this app and modify it to your heart's desire. You can do pretty much anything that you want to do and just simply plug it into your existing apps that you may be building and not need to actually code this whole thing up. So we click here and here we see, hey, how are you? Etc, etc. Okay, so this flow works great. The next thing I want to do is I want to do this send a new message flow. All right, so let's work on this flow where we are sending a new message. And the first thing that we want to take a look is the database. So where are we going to be sending this message to? Well, we have this chat messages, and the data that we need to send is we need the chat ID, which we know. We need the user ID, which we don't know because this is from another table. And we have the actual message that we do know. And so what we need here is we need this user ID, and this user ID is pulled up via a query from this user info table. And so we have this user ID. We need this ID right here. This is the authenticated user. This is the ID. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to do a query on this row level so that when we send this data, we're going to have access to all of these variables. We're going to have access to this input, and we'll be able to send it into the database. And so I'm going to add a backend query here, and we want to query this this table right here. This is going to be this a user's info. We're going to add a filter, and the filter is we want to query the user ID, I believe, this user ID right here. In fact, this is the table and this is the user ID. This is what we want to query. So we're going to come back here and we want to say equal to authenticated user. Okay, user ID. And the query type, we want a single row because we're only getting this one user. Okay, so now we should get the whole user information. We'll have that ID of the user. And so now when the user clicks send, we are going to have the whole information, the entire information at our disposal. So we're going to come here, add an action, open this, let's add an action. And here we're going to do insert row. And what do we want to insert a row in is this chat messages. Let's add all the fields. We can remove these. because they're automatically created for us. Chat ID is from that parameter, right? Chat row, and we get this chat ID. Okay. Next, we have the user ID, and this is what we are pulling from the user info row. And here we have the user info row, and all we want is the ID. So we get the ID, and the message is the easiest part. And this is this widget state input message. And the other thing I want to do is I want to clear the text field. Okay. So when they send the message, we don't want that message to still be displaying there. It should be cleared. Another thing that we want to do is we want to refresh the database. So you can simply type refresh database request, and you can select this list view here. This is what we want to refresh. Okay. So now we have this flow here, this label here. Let's go fix that. We don't really need that. Kind of self-explanatory, right? This enter message, something like this. All right. Let's go ahead and run this. Let's do a reload, and let's see if it works. All right, there's the chat. Click here, and we have the messages, and now we can enter a new message, and it should appear here. Hopefully, I am doing awesome. Okay, click send, and there's our message. Perfect. Let's go back to Supabase. Let's take a look at our messages, and this is our messages view. And as you can see, it's here, and that is because it's obviously also in chat messages. Okay, so if we come back here, we should see this message here, right? And another thing that we can do, and maybe we'll do that later, is to display the time. When was that message sent? Because we have the created field on each record. So it's going to be very, very easy to display the time. In fact, let's do that right now while we still remember. So let's go to this column. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. And I'm going to get my created at. We're going to format it is datetime format, and I want to do relative here, and same thing here, duplicate, and I'm going to do created at, and I'm going to say confirm. And you can also make it a little bit smaller, so maybe font size 12. Come back here. All right, now let's go ahead and reload this and see how our newly improved chat messages screen looks like. All right, there's the app. Click here, and there you see it. So that was, a while ago. This is recently, and this is recently. And obviously, you can format it, add some padding to it. Maybe we'll do that a little bit later. I can send another message. Hey, is anyone here? Okay, and there you see the message. And let's also change this to maybe chat, something like this. And now we have a fully functioning chat screen here. There's still two things that we need to do. We need to have a flow where we create a new chat with a particular user, and another flow where we are adding another user to our group chat. Okay, so if we go to this chats here, we already have a button, and this button does not have a flow. And so what we want to do is we want to display this user select component here. And if the user selects a user, they click on the user, we're going to add that user to our chat. Okay. So let's go ahead and get this component working. And for that, what we need to do is we have this list view here, right? So if you click on this list view, you see this list view here. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure it pulls up the right users. And what kind of users do we want to pull up? Well, the users that we want are going to come from this table, this A user info. Okay, so this table is this auxiliary table, but it has all the data that we need, plus the nicknames, as well as maybe some additional information. All you need to do is create another column, and you can use this information. It's that flexible. So we're going to come back here. We're going to do a backend query, Supabase query, and we want to do this A user info right here. Now, here we want to make sure that we are not going to be listing ourselves. So we're going to add a filter so that this user ID does not equal to authenticated user, because there's no point of working with ourselves, adding ourselves, etc., etc. That's kind of what we want. And now we have a list view. Now let's go ahead and set this up. So it has a checkbox list tile for the information. So let's go ahead and configure this. So this friend name may be a nickname city, state, subtitle. I don't know, we can display something else, or we can remove that altogether. And then this is an avatar. We don't have an avatar. You can add an avatar if you want, but that is kind of what we have so far, just a bunch of users. And when they click on the user, it's going to automatically add that user into our chat. And so that user will see the chat that we've created. So if I enter something in the chat, it's going to be visible to both parties. All right, so now that we've configured this component here, let's go ahead and put it into action. So we're going to go to chats, this icon button, open this up, add an action, and select this bottom sheet, show. And we're going to select the component, user list component, and let's go ahead and run the app and see if everything works. Let's go ahead and reload. All right, so if we click here, we have this component pop up. Now, of course, there's some formatting issues, but as you can see, it is displaying the two other people. It's not displaying us, it is displaying the other people. Let's go ahead and fix some of the formatting here. I'm not a big fan of just how it looks. So if we come back here, what I want to do is I want to make sure that this column is actually not taking up the whole space. It's only taking up the space that it needs. And let's go ahead and reload this, see how that looks. All right, click here, and now it's a little bit smaller. Okay, it's still displaying all of this, so we need to fix that. Let's go ahead and give it a background color. We can do maybe white, and let's go ahead and reload this. Let's see how it looks. All right, now it looks a little bit better. It has a nice white background color. Let's go ahead and remove this, clean it up a little bit. Let's come back here. We don't need this progress bar or whatever that is. We just have a column, a user. Choose a contact. We can delete this. Just gonna have one user for now. All right, let's go ahead and reload this. All right, click here. Now we can select the user, and that looks a lot better. So the idea is we're gonna click on the user, and it's going to create a new chat with that user. Now, the way that we're going to be creating this new chat is going to be done in 2 steps. The first thing that we need to do is create a new record in this A chats. Okay, this is going to be this main record here. And after that, we are going to add this user into this add chat users here once we have the chat, because we need this chat ID here and we need the user ID as well. Okay, let's go ahead and do that right now. Come back here and let's go ahead and create an action on this component here. Open this up, add an action, and we are going to create the new chat. So we're going to say insert row, table is a chats. Let's get all the fields. And in terms of the fields, we're not going to be filling any of the fields here. These are going to be just left as defaults. And we just need this action output variable name, new chat row, because it's going to be giving us back the row. And next, we're going to be doing another operation. We're going to be doing an insert row. Table is going to be a chat users. And here we're definitely going to be using some of these fields. We can remove these ones on the chat ID. We're going to take that action outputs, new chat row ID, confirm. And for the user ID, it's very, very simple. We already have the user record. So all we need to do is get their ID from this A users info. And this is the ID right here. And all right, so now we are creating a new chat and we are adding that user into our chat. We do have an error here, and let's take a look. So it's telling us it needs to have at least one field. Okay, so let's create this field here. Just put something like new chat. Okay, so we have something there. All right, here's our app. And if we click here, we get the list. Now, if I click here, it should create a new chat in the background. So if we come back here, we see we have a new chat here created, and we also have new users placed into this chat right here. The problem is it's not closing this thing, right? It needs to close it so that we can go back and start chatting with these people. So let's go ahead and fix this right now. So we're going to go to our component, open these actions, and we need to make sure that it closes. Dismiss. If you search for dismiss, you have this dismiss right here. And so this thing is going to close. And then we also want to refresh this page, the chats page, so that we see this new chat. So if we click here, we can do a refresh database request on this list view here. All right. So let's go ahead and reload the app, see if this works. All right. There's the app. There's our chat right here. Go back and let's create a new chat. Let's talk to Tom right here. here. Now we've created a new chat, but when this thing reloads, we do not see this chat. And the reason we don't see this chat is because we have a small bug. So as you can see, these are the chat. This is the chat that has been created, but we are not on this chat. So we need to make sure that we add ourselves to the list of users on this chat. It's not just about adding the other user. It's always adding ourselves at the end as well. So let's go ahead and fix this right now. Come back here, click on the component right here, and we want to select this container here, open this up. And as you can see, we're creating the chat, we're adding this other user, but now we also need to add ourselves as well. Okay, so I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this action here, I'm going to paste it, and then I'm gonna add myself. So I'm just gonna say add myself. So the chat ID is the same, but the user ID is going to be us. Now I know my user ID is 1, so I'm just gonna put 1 for now. Okay, just to make sure that it works. We're gonna reload this and we're gonna create a new chat. All right, here's the app. Let's go ahead and add a new user. Let's say Rob. And now we see the chat with Rob here. Now, if you click here, we are redirected to the chat messages screen, but we're still seeing the other messages that belong to a different chat. And that is because we're not filtering them correctly. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. Come back to chat messages. And here we need to make sure that we're filtering them correctly for this specific chat. And so you want to select the list view and you want to add a filter in this A chat messages info view. So we're going to add a filter. We're going to say chat ID equal to, and we're going to select our chat row, and we have a chat ID right there. So we're going to say confirm. Okay, let's go ahead and reload this. All right, there's our app. Now, if I click on this one, I see the messages for this chat right here. But if I click on this one, I see no messages, and I can certainly add a new message. Hey, anyone there? And there you see the message. And so if Rob logs in, he should be able to see the messages there as well. And we are going to be testing as other users a little bit later in this tutorial. Now, one last thing that I want to add is the ability to add other users into an existing chat. So if I come to this chat right here, there are 3 people in here, but let's say I want to add another user and I want them to be able to chat here as well. And let's do that right now. Now, for the functionality where we're going to be adding a new user into this group chat, the way that this is going to work is we simply need to add another record into this A chat users. Okay, so we simply take the existing chat ID and then add the new user ID here as a complete new record. So the first thing that we can do is we can add a button to the app bar. Let's do that right now. And let's add an icon button. Okay, let's go ahead and align it correctly. Something like this. And for this icon button, we can do something. Yeah, this plus is nice. And maybe remove the background color from the app bar. Clear this color. Something like this. Now, when they click on this button, we want to display the same dialog, right? That's going to pop up from the bottom. And they can click on the user and they're going to be added into this chat. And so we're going to duplicate this component because it's going to have slightly different functionality. We're going to say user add. Okay. And what we're going to be doing is we are going to be triggering this component right here. This is going to be this. We're going to select bottom sheet, show, and we're going to select this component, user add to chat, background. Let's make it white. Now, when the user clicks on it, this second component is going to pop up, this user add chat. They're going to be seeing this thing right here. Let's go ahead and test this out. Let's create a new session. All right, here's the app. And let's say we're only chatting with Rob. Awesome. And I want to add another person. So I can simply click here and I have this choose a contact. Okay, and now I can select a contact. And that's going to be added right there. And so now let's go ahead and create the logic for that so that it is correctly added. Okay, we're going to come back here and this user chat, we need to change the logic. So if we click on the user right here and we go to the actions, and here we're not going to be creating chats anymore. Okay, we're going to be adding this user to chat users to an existing chat. So we're going to delete this action right here. And we also don't need to add ourselves to the chat have because we are already there. We just need to add this other user. So we're going to delete this, and all we need to do is add the current user to the chat. Okay. Now here we need to know the current chat that we're dealing with. We are going to be sending it a parameter. So this button right here, if it opens up, we want to set a parameter, and the parameter that we're going to be sending is the same one that chat messages receive. So it receives this a chat summary, and that's exactly what we can send, and that keeps things nicely organized. So we're going to go back here. We're going to add a parameter. It's going to be a Supabase row, and it's going to be a chat summary. This one right here. Okay. And this is required chat row. Okay. Current, or you can do current chat row, something like this. And now if we come over here, we can actually send this parameter. We're going to pass this parameter, and we have this parameter, right? And that parameter is this parameter that's being passed to that chat messaging view. So we can just confirm it, and we can just pass it along. Okay. All right. So now this view here, this add chat component, has the a chat summary. And so now it can do anything that it wants, right? So if we go back to the container, open it up, insert row, we can just pull up the current chat ID from the parameter, right? We're going to take this current chat row, get the chat ID, and we have the chat ID. So all we need to do is add the current user that we have, that the component knows about, and the chat ID that's being passed from the chats page as a parameter here. And that's the only thing that we need to do. And so once the user selects a person, they're going to be automatically added to the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out. All right, so here are our chats, and let's say we choose this chat right here, and we add another user, let's say Tom. This thing closes up, and the user should have been added, and we can simply go to our database to take a look at what's happening. So here we have a chat users, and as you can see, this is that last chat. And in that chat, we have 3 users there. So all of these 3 users can see that chat. And we are going to test out in just a moment as another user, just to make sure that we can see each other's chats. Another thing that would be nice to do would be to display some kind of a message that the user has been added. So let's go do that right now. Come back here and let's go to chat messages, click this, open this, and let's add a snack bar. User has been added. The next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to log in as another user just to make sure that they can also see the chats. And for that, I need to be able to log out. And for that, I need to create a separate profile page. That's going to make it easier for me to log out and log back in. So let's go ahead and create this very simple page. Let's say it's a profile page. Still a good idea to have in your app, but this is going to be part of a bigger app. Okay, so we have a profile page, and here I want to display maybe my email or something like this. So here, let's say I want to display my email, authenticated user email, and here I'm just going to be displaying the user ID for testing, user ID. Okay, and this button right here is going to be doing the log out. So we're going to be doing Supabase auth log out. Okay, looks good. And let's make sure we can get to this page and create the proper navbar for this page. Okay, navbar is off. Let's enable the navbar. Now we have the navbar. We need at least 2 pages. So let's do that for this chats page. Okay, so we have home page and the profile page. Let's go ahead and reload our app and try logging in as other users to see if we can see the chats as well as communicate with the other people. All right, let's click here. And as you can see, I'm logged in as james@james.com. I'm going to click on log out. And now we're back to the login screen. All right, so let's say we try to log in as one of the other users. Let's say this is Tom. Here's the information, sign in, and we are seeing the chats. And as you can see, Tom is not being displayed. We simply see the other chats. So we can click here and we can see this chat here and we can enter a message. And on this chat, everything is correct, right? We see the other users on the left-hand side, and this is Tom's message, and we're logged in as Tom. So we can display it, hey, okay? And now this is the message right here. And you can do the same thing with the other chats. This is another chat. Okay. And now you see the message here. Now, one little tip that I want to give you, and this is going to be applicable in this app, is that you want to make sure that, for instance, if you click on this chat and you have all of these people here, you don't want to enter, the same person, right? You don't want to do that. You want the system to not give you the option to enter the same person. And you can easily do that on the back end. So if you take a look at one of these tables here, so let's say this chat users table, this table has a list of chats and a list of users. And we do not want to have a situation where we have a duplicate of this, right? So we do not want to have another record that also has, let's say, chat with ID 9 and user with ID 2, because that should not happen. And so you can enforce this on the back end so that, even if, your app allows it, it's not going to be done on the back end. And the way that you can do it is by creating a constraint on unique values. Let me show you how you can do that. And so what you can do is you can go to SQL editor here, and you can either ask Supabase to build the query for you, or you can build it yourself. And so here's the query that you want to be using. This creates a unique index on two values for this table, and this means that this combination will not appear ever again. It can only appear once, and this is how you do it. And now all you need to do is execute this query, and it says success, no rows returned. Now if you go back to your table editor here, and let's say you go to this chat users, this is where this constraint is, and you click on definition, you're gonna see this constraint right here. So you have this table definition, but you also have this unique index constraint. And so what this means is that if you, for any reason, your app creates another record that has, a combination of these two. So 9.2 is not going to work. 9.1 is not going to work. 9.3 is not going to work because we already have it. 9.4 is going to work, right? So for instance, let's say I try to do that right here. I insert a row and chat ID is 9 and user ID is 1, right? This should not work because that specific chat has all of these three users. So if I add 1 and I click save, I should get an error, and it says here, failed to run SQL query, duplicate key value violates unique constraint. And this is very, very powerful because in some situations, it's okay to have duplicates, right? Many times it's okay to have duplicates, but in some unique situations, like here, you do not want to have duplicates. And so even if your app, lets a user add duplicates, well, you're never going to violate this integrity, this table integrity of having, duplicates, because if you allow duplicates, it means that, you're going to have a chat with let's say 6 people and 3 of them could be duplicates of each other. Or you can have a chat with like 5 duplicates of somebody else, right? You never want to have that happen. And this is a way that you can guarantee it. All right. So this is our real-time group chat app that you can use either as a base for some kind of a messaging app, or maybe as an add-on feature inside a more complex app. It's really, really up to you. And so if you're thinking about implementing this kind of chat functionality into one of the apps that you're building, or maybe you've already built it, then you will be able to do it very, very easily using the app that I built here. And the easiest way to implement this app is by joining our amazing Patreon community. Because when you join our amazing Patreon community, not only will you be able to view and or clone this specific app, which means you can take it, you can modify it, you can do anything that you want with it, but you also get access to all the apps that I have on the channel. They're all there on the Patreon. You can easily view and or clone them, ask questions, engage with our amazing, rapidly growing community over there on Patreon. Plus, you'll get access to some extra content, Q&As, live streams, behind the scenes content, and our masterclass series where I do deep dives on specific topics that the community votes on. And beyond all that, you're going to be, of course, supporting this channel and supporting my work. And that is highly, highly appreciated. And so if you get values from these videos and these tutorials, if they help you in any way, shape, or form, then one way that you can reciprocate is by becoming a supporter. And you can do just that using the link in the description. And so I really, really hope to see you as part of our rapidly growing, amazing Patreon community.